The Dao De Jing, pronounced Dao De Jing. Chapter 54. This chapter begins with 2 observations about what it means for something to truly hold, then unfolds outward through every scale of human life, from the single person to the whole of the world. Zhēn jiàn bu ba, Shàn bao ji bu chuò, Zǐsūn jìsì bu chuò, zhu zhai yu shēn, kai de nai zhēn, zhu zhai yu jia, kai de nai yu, zhu zhai yu zhang, kai de nai cháng, zhu zhai yu guò, kai de nai fēng, zhu zhai yu tiānxià, kai de nai pu, hu yi shen guān shēn, yi jia guān jia, yi zhang guān zhang, yi guò guān guò, yi tiānxià guān tiānxià. Wu hei yi zhai tiānxià ran zai, yi sai. What is well planted cannot be uprooted. What is well held cannot be lost. Generation after generation will continue the offerings without cease. Cultivate it in yourself, and the virtue is genuine. Cultivate it in the family, and the virtue overflows. Cultivate it in the village, and the virtue endures. Cultivate it in the state, and the virtue is abundant. Cultivate it under heaven, and the virtue is universal. So look at the self through the self. Look at the family through the family. Look at the village through the village. Look at the state through the state. Look at the world through the world. How do I know what the world is? Through this. The chapter opens with 2 paired observations. What is well built cannot be pulled out. What is well held cannot slip free. These aren't instructions about how to grip tighter. They're noticing something about the nature of what holds. Durability doesn't come from force. It comes from the quality of how something was planted in the first place. A tree with a shallow root can be toppled. You can't fix that by tying it to a post. Then there's a line that can sound strange today. Descendants will continue the offerings without cease. This is an image from ritual. Sacrifice as the living thread between generations. The ongoing act of honoring what has been established. Read it loosely if the religious framing doesn't work for you. What it's pointing at is simpler. When something is genuinely established, it outlasts the person who put it in place. Not by obligation, but because it keeps being worth honoring. Then comes the chapter's central structure, 5 levels, 5 different expressions of the same word. Chinese letter, de, usually translated as virtue. It's closer to something like presence, or the living power of what's real. The text says this power takes a different quality at each level. In the self, it's genuine, not admirable, not impressive. Genuine, that's a precise word. You can perform virtue for others. You can't perform it for yourself for long. At the level of the individual, there is no audience. The self knows what it is. In the family, it overflows. There's more than enough. A family where something real has been cultivated doesn't need to ration its relationships like a budget. Abundance isn't manufactured. It's what's left when something true is present at the center. In the village, it endures. The word implies duration, something that doesn't wear thin with use. Communities that hold together across decades and generations aren't held by rules or by fear. Something has taken hold in the ground they share. In the state, it flourishes. The word here suggests richness, a living fullness. A state where this is present isn't just stable, it has a quality that can't be produced by policy alone. Under heaven, it's universal. It reaches everywhere, not because it's broadcast or enforced, but because what is genuinely rooted spreads the way roots spread, without announcement, following what the ground will allow. Then comes the part of the chapter that's easy to miss. Laozi, or whoever's voice this is, asks, how do I know what the world is? And the answer is, through this. The method he's describing is looking at each level from within itself, not from above, not by applying a framework developed elsewhere. You understand a person by what persons are. You understand a family by what families are. A village through its own life. A country through what countries actually do, not what they claim to do. This cuts against a familiar assumption that distance produces clarity, that the outside expert with the broad view sees more clearly than the person living inside a thing. The text says something different. Appropriate observation means standing in the right place for what you're looking at. There's no single vantage point from which the whole is visible all at once. The method is to inhabit each level, not to transcend it. What this chapter doesn't offer is a technique. It doesn't say how to cultivate what's genuine, only that the scale of cultivation determines the scale of what follows. Something real in a person becomes something different when it moves through a family, not diminished or enlarged, but differently expressed. The nature of virtue isn't fixed. It takes the shape of a container. The closing lines suggest a kind of epistemic humility that's easy to understate. You can think about what you haven't inhabited. You can read about countries you've never visited, study families you've never been part of, but the text implies you should hold those thoughts at the right distance, knowing you're working from outside, not from within. What is well planted cannot be uprooted. The chapter offers no recipe for planting well. only the assurance that when something is truly established, in a person, in a household, in a place, it holds. Everything else follows from that, or doesn't. The next chapter is 55.